right. Translation. Dhruva Mahārāja thus surpassed the 7 planetary systems of the great sages who are known as saptarṣis. Beyond that region, he achieved the transcendental situation of permanent life in the planet where Lord Viṣṇu lives. Report. The airplane was piloted by the 2 chief associates of Lord Viṣṇu, namely Sunanda and Nanda. Only such spiritual astronauts can pilot their airplane beyond the 7 planets and arrive in the region of eternal blissful life. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita also, parastasmat tu bhavonyaha, that beyond this planetary system begins the spiritual sky where everything is permanent and blissful. The planets there are known as Viṣṇuloka or Vaikuṇṭha-loka. Only there can one get an eternal blissful life of knowledge. Beyond Vaikuṇṭha-loka is the material universe, where Lord Brahma and the other in Brahmaloka can live until the annihilation of this universe. But that life is not permanent. That is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Abrahma Bhuvanaloka. Every place full of miseries, including Brahmaloka. Even if one goes to the topmost planet, one cannot achieve eternal life. Only by arriving in Vaikuṇṭha-loka can one live eternally blissful life, an eternally blissful life. So the verse again is Triloking Deva Yanena Sot Ivrajya Munimapi Parastadya Jvagatir Viṣṇu Padam Matavyagas. Dhruva Mahārāja thus surpassed the 7 planetary systems of the great sages who are known as saptarṣis. Beyond that region, he achieved the transcendental situation of permanent life in the planet where Lord Viṣṇu lives. Okay, so there are some concepts that I'm going to try and explain that may be a little bit difficult. I'll do my best. I've saved the kind of more complicated stuff towards the end in case it takes too long or anyone loses interest. But first of all, Dhurvaloka is a self-luminous planet. As a matter of fact, all the other bodies, luminous bodies in this universe, borrow or reflected light from that light. Otherwise, it's darkness in this world. Even the sun gets its light ultimately from the Brahmajyoti energy of the Lord. So that effulgent planet, Dhurvaloka, is self-luminous, and all other planets circumambulate it. Later on, in the next few verses, we're going to hear Medhyam Eva Gavyam Ganaha. So Gavyam Ganaha means like a herd of bulls. They're going around a grinding border. So similarly, all the planets, they're revolving around Dhruva's planet, just as if tied by the ropes of the wind. When I was young, I used to play tetherball. You know what that is? You've got this fixed pole in the ground, and then you've got a ball tied to a rope, and it's kind of like that. You know, you hit the ball, and it goes around the stationary pole, and at the point of the ball, the planet, it's got great force and speed. So similarly, all the planets are going with great force and speed around the stationary point of Dhurvaloka, circumambulating. Therefore, it's said in this verse that it's higher than all the other abodes, even the 5 planets of the great sages. Trilokyam means the summit of the status of all the other planetary systems. 2 or 3 verses from now, actually the words that will be used is Chuda Mani, that it's the summit or the best of all jewels, that planet. So Triloka, it doesn't just mean planetary systems, it also refers to, we understand from the Gayatri mantra, that not only is Bhurbuva Sva, not only the planetary systems, but it's also different levels of consciousness. So this brings us to our next slide. Om Bhurbuva Sva. It can be either planetary systems or levels of consciousness. So there's two methods to transport to Dhurvaloka. One is mystic yoga, and the other is by vimana. So the yogic process is, there's a saying, as above, so below. Our body is a microcosm of the universal body, and we can transport our soul anywhere we desire if we are qualified by using the physical body as a launching pad and the mind as the vehicle, and the propellant is the 5 types of air, it's the prana. So the chakras, as pictured here, they correspond to different elements, colors, frequencies, and bijas, sound. So, for instance, you start at the root, the Mula chakra, and it's earth, then it goes to fire, water, fire, air, etc. And then you can see here, it starts out red, then as you go up, it's orange, and then yellow, etc. And each one of the chakras, they have a certain frequency, beginning from 256 hertz to 480 hertz at the Brahmarandra, higher and higher pitched sound. And then there are bija mantras represented here by these different letters. So for the Muladhara chakra, the root chakra, it's Lam. For the Swadhisthana, the sacrum, that's Vam. For the Manipura, it's Ram. That's the navel. So this is also not only the navel in our body, the navel chakra, but it's also the navel of the Virat. It's known as the navel of Viṣṇu. I know when I was studying the martial arts for many years, one of the main principles is to understand the hara, which is the center of all energies, and it's that chakra, the Manipura chakra. So if you see here, we're looking, see I got my little light here, what's it called, red light? Anyway, from the root chakra, as it goes gradually up to the Brahmarandra, it starts out quite dense, and then it becomes more and more subtle. The energies, as we go up, gross and then and condensed in the root, and then as it expands, it becomes increasingly more subtle. Similarly, just like a tree, it starts out as a seed, which is very dense and hard, and then it sprouts roots, which are also quite condensed, to break through the earth and the rock. And then as it rises into the air, reaching out towards the sun, it becomes freer and freer, and it unfolds into leaves and soft twigs and buds. And at the crown, there's fruits and flowers. Similarly, the same way with the mystic yogi, as he passes through the different levels of energies, through the different chakras, he goes to more and more subtle levels. Similarly, the universe itself, as we go higher and higher, according to our qualification, the realms expand. They expand in time, in measurement, in the amount of intelligence that we're given, in our lifespan, in vibhuti, or the opulence that we have access to. Exactly the same. The chakras and the structure of the universe also, it starts out very gross, and then it expands and becomes more and more subtle. So there's a direct correspondence between the physical and the mystical universe. And then you see here the crown chakra. It's called a sahasra. Sahasra means 1,000, so it's 1,000 petals lotus. There are energy centers which are recognized in Chinese medicine, throughout the East. Only in Western cultures they don't know what this is. But there's these nadis, which are just like in a river, you have tributaries. So nadis are energy pathways. And the lotus has 1,000 different nadis. And just like a lotus, it has 1,000 different tubulars that go down to suck nutrients out of the ground. Similarly, the Sahasra chakra, it has 1,000 different pathways, and the yogi is to find a particular pathway to go back to find the Brahmarandra. So he has to pass through the Shushumara to the Dhurvaloka. And this is described in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, verse 24 and 25, where it reads in part that a mystic passes over the Milky Way by the illuminating Shushumara. I'm sorry, I misread that, sorry. By the illuminating Shushumna to reach the highest planet, Brahmaloka. He goes first to Vaishvanara. I misread that too. Blah. Vaishvanara, the planet of the deity of fire. So as we see here, if you're looking at my little pointer, this is where Vaishvanara would be, the planet. And the yogis, it's revealed to them this form of a dolphin. They enter through its mouth, they follow it all the way to its tip, and they arrive at Dhurvaloka. So, they go to this Vaishvanara planet, the deity of fire, wherein he, the yogi, becomes completely cleansed of all contamination, and thereafter he still goes higher to the circle of Shushumara, which is the bottleneck dolphin, as you see here, to relate with Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. This Shushumara is the pivot for the turning of the complete universe, and is called the navel of Viṣṇu, Garbhodakṣayi Viṣṇu. So the purport is the polar star of the universe, and the circle thereof is called Shushumara, circle. And therein, the local residential planet of the personality of Godhead, Garbhodakṣayi Viṣṇu, is situated. Before reaching there, the mystic passes over the Milky Way to reach Brahmaloka, and while going there, he first reaches Vaishvanara Loka, where the demigod controls fire. On Vaishvanara Loka, the yogi becomes completely cleansed of all dirty sins acquired while in contact with the material world. The Milky Way in the sky is herein indicated as the way leading to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the universe. So you see here, this is not only the navel chakra, Ram, pictured in yellow. That's the color it emanates and the sound that it produces. It's not only the navel chakra for the yogi, but it's also the navel of the Virat, the navel of the universal form. So by following this form of a bottle-nosed dolphin, one can reach the planet of Dhurvaloka by following the stars. By the way, if anybody knows how in the world it got its name, I've always been puzzled by this, because Shishu is a little baby and Mara is to kill. So I don't know why these dolphins, they're said to kill their children, but anyway, Shushumara. So that leads us to the next slide. So one way to get to another planet is through the yogic process, and the other way is by Vimana, which we're seeing Dhruva Mahārāja, that's how he's getting to the spiritual world. So we also have our Vimanas. We have spacecraft, rockets that have jet propulsion. How come we can't go to Dhurvaloka in the same way? Well, one thing is that when our present physical bodies are made of the 5 elements, the Pancha or the Mahabhutas, and the vehicle that they take into space, that's also made of the 5 gross elements. So first of all, there's not fuel enough to reach Dhurvaloka. It's not going to happen. And not only that, our lifespan is only 100 years at best, so we're never going to make it. But not only that, if we're using the same material elements to go to higher realms, it's not going to be possible to use those machines or these bodies to enter into those realms. For example, our body is made up of approximately 70% water. Now, if we want to go to the sun planet, how are we going to go to the sun planet with a body that's mostly made of water? That's the problem. We're going to burn up. Our so-called Vimana spaceship is going to burn up, and we are going to burn up inside of it. The only way you're going to be able to enter into the sun planet is if you become fire yourself, the same element. So it's described that the Vimana that Dhruva Mahārāja climbed into, he ascended, was made of the same elements. It was spiritual. It's described that he circumambulated the plane, and as he circumambulated it, his body turned golden. In other words, his body became of the same nature as the transcendental plane, and therefore he was able to ride that airplane to Vaikuntha. So it's the same way. We can't go to higher realms if we're using gross elements. So again, Triloka means the 3 planetary systems. So these are not just planets like round balls in space. Those are real. That's what this Earth is made of, right? It's a round ball. However, it's not just a round ball. It's an abode. It's a plane of existence, as are other realms. There are higher realms, and they are not necessarily geographically above or below. They are planetary systems or realms of existence for higher and lower beings that inhabit them. So now we go to the next slide. So I wanted to make an analogy here. I grew up in Southern California, not actually in LA, but close to it. So I spent enough time in LA that I know it very, very well. I know different parts of LA. So I'm going to use an analogy here that Los Angeles has many different abodes, many different lokas. So one loka would be like Watts, East LA, Compton. If anybody has been to LA and they know these places, they are horrible places. Watts was the scene of the 1965 riots where many, many people were killed. Thousands of National Guard were called in to try and stop days and days worth of riots. All of these places are horrible. Just like Compton. I remember just a few years ago, I was walking through the Walmart parking lot, and I startled one guy because I needed to ask him something, and he almost dropped out of his skin. He's like, ah! And I talked to him for a while. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you like that. It turned out that he grew up in Compton, and he was like freaked out. You don't walk up on somebody like that. And I said, okay, well, sorry. And because he grew up there, he never got it out of his system. It was so dangerous there, horrible place. So this is one abode where people who are attracted go there and they live there, either because they have to, they can't get out, or they actually like living in such an atmosphere. They are magnetically drawn to such a place. Then there's other places, like let's say Inglewood, Westwood, Glenwood, Pasadena, Burbank, if anyone knows these places. This is suburbia. This is like middle-class, blue-collar working families. They're good American citizens with a car in the garage and a chicken in the pot, you could say. Then there's other places in LA, for instance, Hollywood, Santa Monica, Anaheim. These are places of entertainment. There's theme parks, big shopping malls, etc. Then there's other places, like for instance, Beverly Hills, Malibu, Laguna Beach. This is for like upper class, high-end homes with manicured lawns and swimming pools, and there's accesses to beaches and all kinds of recreation. And then above it all, there's Bel Air. Bel Air is the place for the rich and the famous. This is like the cream of the crop, where only select few are able to live. So now, next slide. So this is where I wanted to come to. This is the point of all this. I hope this analogy fits. So you see all these circles here. They're scattered all over the map. They're not simply from south to north on the map, but they're geographically, they're situated in different places on the map. So it's not that you can just say that anything south is going to be horrible and anything going north is going to be nice. It's not like that. It's all over the map. So you can look at these different abodes, different lokas in different ways. You can look at it geographically, topographically, or social economically, according to its status. So geographically, there's a physical location for all of these places on the earth. It can be plotted and you can find it on a map, as you can see here. But beyond that, it's got a topographic elevation. In other words, there's a location in space relative to the world's oceans. In other words, it's sea level, which is a little bit more subtle to perceive, but it's equally real. And then there's social economic status. I worked as an appraiser, an appraisal apprentice for a couple of years. And the first thing you do when you analyze a property is its location, geographic location, but then it's got its construction cost and then its market value, which is determined by what's around it, what's been sold. And then it has its assessed value, what the city say it's worth. And then finally you come to its perceived or its subjective value. So all of these are relative perceptions, but nevertheless they're absolutely real. It depends on our point of view, what we focus our attention on, and our ability to perceive it. So with this, I want to give an example of, you've got the owner living in the house, wherever it is in LA, and then you got the dog, the owner's pet. So the dog can find his way home. If it gets, dropped off downtown or whatever, eventually it's going to find its way home, wherever it is on the map. But the dog, you're never going to be able to explain to him the value of that home. The social economic status of the inhabitants, of the owner of the home. You can't even explain to the dog its topographical relationship, what to speak of its perceived or subjective value. Yet all of these perceptions are real. That's without a doubt. Each of these are abodes, are lokas. They're realms that are populated and enjoyed by real people. Usually, all of these abodes, all these lokas, they are higher in topography, although not necessarily. There's all kinds of descriptive names. These are all places in LA. There's Beverly Hills. There's Canyon Crest, Vista Del Mar, Sunset Cliffs, Ocean View. You notice all of those, they suggest a location that's exclusive with a panoramic view. So, like, it's a place that's above the social economic status of people that are less fortunate. Yet, sometimes what's higher or more elevated can be lower topography. So we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is an artist's rendition of what's called Bilva Svargas. So Giri Govardhana has mentioned this several times in his talks. There are 7 Bilva Svargas, or Bilva means whole, and Svarga is like heavenly. So they're heavenly places in a hole, or in other words, underneath the Bhumandala, underneath the earth. So 7 Bilasvargas, and each of the Bilasvarga planetary systems are 10,000 yojanas. And these places are so heavenly that they're much nicer than any of the realms of the demigods. Mayadanava, he has built palaces and gardens and streets and fountains, all kinds of amazing structures that the demigods can't even imagine. They're so nice. And that's the abodes of the Daityas and the Danavas and the Nagas. They all live there. So the Nagas that inhabit these realms, these snakes, they have jewels that they're born with, they're embedded within their head, and they're so brilliant and they're so luminous and voluminous, so many of them, that there's no such thing as day and night. There's only eternal day. It's kind of like living in Las Vegas all the time. The lights are always on. So there's no need for a sun or a moon, because it's underneath Bhumandala. The sun and the moon illumination cannot reach there. But yet there's no need, because there's no day or night. It's always eternally bright. And the inhabitants, they both drink and they bathe in these juices and elixirs that are full of wonderful herbs, and therefore they're free of fear. They don't die. They never become ill. They don't have infirmities like we do on the Earth planet. We have gray hairs and wrinkles. When you get old, you become disabled. You have all kinds of problems. They don't even lose the luster of their body. There's no infirmities, and even their perspiration. When they sweat, they don't smell bad. It's amazing what it's like there. And there's no premature death. The only fear that they have is at a certain point, the Sudarshan Chakra is going to come, and it's going to kill all these demons and nagas. But that's so whether we're talking about Bilsvarga or Malibu or Bel Air, all of these places, they may not necessarily be high elevation, but one thing we can count on is that they're all gated communities. That's a fact. If you don't have the right qualifications, then the guards are just not going to let you in. They're not going to let you through the gates unless you've been invited in. So that's one point. Excuse me. Then we go to the next slide. Now, I know this is kind of hard to see. I hope it's blown up enough. You can also use tools on Start Meeting that you can blow it up yourself. But anyway, this is the structure of the universe as described in the Puranas, and specifically in the Bhagavad Purana, what the universe is. So to locate, where is Dhurvaloka? Dhurvaloka, if you're looking at my pointer, it says Dhurvaloka is about right here. See, this is the Garbhodak Ocean. The totality of the universe, this you'll find in the Bhagavatam and some of the illustrations, this illustration, half of the universe is filled up with the Garbhodak Ocean. The entire length of the universe from one end to another, in other words, its diameter, is approximately 510 million yojanas, each yojana being about 8 miles, and half of it is the Garbhodak Ocean, which is 250 million yojanas. So the other half is filled up by the different planetary systems. And as you go from the very bottom, which is extremely condensed and small, tiny, it gets bigger, 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 more fluffed out, more subtle, more space, more time, measurement, lifespan, intelligence, everything until you get to the Satyaloka. So if you just like we're getting the example about the tree, it starts out very, very small little seed, and then it grows up and expands and expands and expands to more and more subtle foliage. So here's the Garbhodak ocean, and then here's the realm of Satyaloka. Above Satyaloka, 26,200,000 yojanas. That's to the edge of the universe where the covering starts. So below that, 120 million yojanas from Tapaloka to the top of Satyaloka, this entire area, this is the area of Brahmaloka, Satyaloka. So over here on this side, you can see it better. So the lotus is usually, because of the limitations of our artistry, we can't put it in scale, but you can just imagine that it fills about half of the universe. That's how big the Satyaloka is, that planetary system. And then below that is the Tapaloka, as seen here. So it's 80 million yojanas between Janaloka and Tapaloka. So this area here, between Tapa and Janaloka, 80 million yojanas. And then as we go down, down, down from Janaloka to Mahārloka, then it's 20 million yojanas. And then between the Svargaloka, the heavenly planets, and the Mahārloka, that 10 million yojanas, that's where we find the Dhurvaloka, which is above the 7 saptarṣis and the Navagraha, the 9 planetary systems. And then you see here, this is so condensed, it's so small that you have to blow it up to another scale, which is given right here. And then here's the Navagraha, starting with the very scary inauspicious Saturn planet, Sanyaścārya, and then Brihaspati, and Mars, and Mercury, Venus, etc., until you get to the 28 stars, and then down to the moon. So the moon is quite a bit higher than the sun. And then the sun, we've got Rahu, and then where the Siddhas, the Charanas lives, and then below them, the Rakshasas, the ghosts, etc. So there's Svarga, and there's Bhura. We can see over here. Here's Svargaloka, and then here's Meru Mountain, and then in the middle of Meru is the Bhuvarloka, and then there's the Bhuloka, the Bhumandala. So Bhu, Bhuvar, Svar. These are the considered the 3 planetary systems, but then again, 3 planetary systems can also refer to the entire universe. And then below that is Atala, Vitala, Sutala. These are all the Bilava Svargas until you get below this, and that's where first of all there's the Pitriloka, and then after that there's all the different hellish planetary systems. So it starts out very condensed and small, and then it gets bigger, 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 higher, higher, more subtle until it gets to the very top. And Dhurvaloka is situated right about here, between Svargaloka and Mahārloka. So now we're going to go to the next slide. Okay, so this is another conception of the universe. This is not the scale. This is our artist's rendition or representation, so that we can understand the most prominent geographic features of the universe. For instance, here we have the Navagraha, all the different planets within our solar system, with the nakshatras. The sun is here, and then above the sun is the moon, and they're all going around the Dhurvaloka. Here's the saptarṣis right here. So this gives us more of a 3-dimensional view. And then here's the Bhumandala being made steady by the Dikpalas. So the Dikpalas, there's 8 of them, 4 on the top, 4 on the bottom. They all have 4 tusks. So why are the Dikpalas, the Dik-Gajendras, sometimes they're called Dikpalas, why are they even there? Why are they necessary? if you take a piece of paper and you put it on the tip of your finger, it hardly has any kind of weight at all. So you can very easily hold it. Similarly, Sheshanaga's holding the planetary systems on his head, and he's not even aware of them. It's so effortless. He's holding above him. He's holding the Bhumandala. Here, I'll just read this verse. For the earth, the resting place is Lord Shesha. For Lord Shesha, the resting place is the great tortoise beneath him, and for the tortoise, the resting place is the wind, and the wind, the resting place is I myself. So, just like you're holding a piece of paper on the tip of your finger, you can hardly tell there's any weight at all. It's no problem holding it there, but it's hard to keep it on the tip of your finger. It tilts. So if you have a balance weight, counterweights, that's what these Dikagendras are. They steady the Bhumandala so that everything stays in orbit. Now, to give some sort of an understanding of why this representation is not the scale, is because Shesha is so huge that the planets that are on his foot are just like mustard seeds. He's not even aware that they're there, effortlessly. And then the Bhumandala is being studied by these Dikagendras. So at the edge of the Bhumandala, there's a mountain, a system of mountains that goes in a circle, completely encircles the Bhumandala, called the Dhurvaloka mountains. And these mountains are so tall, they're so high, that they reach all the way to Dhurvaloka, just above Dhurvaloka. So that means the sun and the moon, all the luminaries, and Dhurvaloka itself are all within like this cone or this cup of the Dhurvaloka mountains. It's described that the Dhurvaloka mountains are just like a lotus with its petals, and the whirl of the lotus is the planetary systems within it. So it's also described that the elephants, the Dikagendras, they are so big that Dhurvaloka, or the Dhurvaloka mountains, it reaches their knees. They're that big. They're huge. So you can't really put this to scale. You can't represent this. But so it's just for our reference. So the interesting thing is that none of this corresponds to what we see in front of our eyes. If you look out in the night sky, you don't see the Dikagendras, you don't see any of this stuff which is described. If you look at a telescope, you just do not see elephants and tortoises and Sheshananga. It doesn't matter how powerful your telescope is, you can't see these things. So where is the proof that any of this exists? So where's the praman, the proof? So we know that the scientific method is pratyaksha. It's pratiyaksha, what's in front of our eyes, what's observable, what is the objective proof that any of this exists. So now I'm going to go to the next slide. I only have 2 slides left, but this next slide is so complex, it's going to take 5 or 10 minutes to explain. So I'll try my best. If anybody gets too bored and you all leave, I will not be offended. But I'll try and get through this as fast as I can. So how do we understand what's out in the night sky? We can't see it. We can look through a telescope. We can purchase a telescope. We can go to an observatory that we can see it closer. But basically, what we understand of what's out there in the universe is what we have been taught by the sciences. It's specifically astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology. This deals with what's out there in the universe. And we have all kinds of images and artist renditions of what's out there, and we believe what we see and what we hear. So I wanted to try and explain how astronomy, especially astrophysicists, how they determine what's out there and how far it is. Because how are you going to measure? We can hardly measure a mile. What to speak of the circumference of the Earth? What to speak of the distance to other planets and stars and galaxies? How are you ever going to measure that? So the way it's measured is called a cosmic distance ladder. So just like you've got a ladder, if you need to get to some place that's out of your reach, you use a ladder, and what you do is you step on the first rung and you see that it's nice and stable, and if you're confident, say, okay, you go to the next step, and then you go to the next step. You keep on going up, 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 till you get to the highest point, the highest elevation. So similarly, there's something called a cosmic distance ladder, and the first rung of this ladder, if you can just follow along here with me, there's something called radar ranging. So what this is basically is you shoot a beam, a radar beam, towards a close object in the solar system, like a planet, and the time it takes to get back that radio signal, if you time it out, you can know to a acceptable degree what the distance is between the Earth, or wherever the telescope is, the radio telescope is, and the distance to that planet, between the Earth and that planet. This works for anything, pretty much most planets and objects within our solar system. However, for things that are much farther, like the stars are outside of our solar system, they're just too far that you can't send a radio signal and expect that it's going to get back until like years and years and years later, and it's going to be so faint you're not going to be able to pick it up. So there's got to be a better way another method to look at farther distance objects, and that's called parallax. So parallax is, everybody understands what it is. You know, when you're riding in a car and you're looking at the moon, it doesn't look like it's moving at all, but when clouds pass, it looks like the clouds are passing, and if you see telephone poles and trees and people, they go right past really, really fast. So that's called parallax. It's relative motion according to the rate that you're traveling. So similarly, if you put your finger in front of your face, and then if you look at a more far off distant object, let's say a tree or something in the yard, if you switch from left to right eyes, closing your eyes, your finger moves relative to your eyes, and therefore you can see it's like the tree is moving along with your finger. So this is called parallax. So the same thing can be done by observing things that are far off in space. So if you're looking at this little chart here, here's a guy with, that's what this represents, somebody looking at in the distance, and then he's got stereoscopic vision, which is relative to what he's looking at. So if you have a background of stars that are so far away that you can't see them, some of those stars are closer than the others. So some stars, they don't appear to move, whereas the stars that are closer, they appear to move. And the reason why they appear to move is because the sun is situated in one place in our solar system, and the Earth, at least with the heliocentric model, the Earth is moving around the sun. So let's just accept the heliocentric model, because either geocentric or heliocentric, you can use either calculations. They'll come out to be exactly the same. There's no way to tell if the Earth is moving, if it's stationary, or if it's moving around the sun, or if the sun is moving around the Earth. But all calculations are still the same. So if you are situated on the Earth and it's moving around the sun, it's just like you've got your finger in front of your eye and you're looking at a far off distant object. You can see it move, so you can measure that. If you're in one place, let's say in January, when you're looking at this nearby star at a background of stars that are much farther away, it's going to appear in this position, and then when you come 6 months later in June and you look in this direction, it's going to look like it moved over to this portion of the sky. So what you can do is you can take the angle you can form a triangle, and then you can use that to triangulate, to use trigonometry to find out what is on the other side, how distant that object is, because of the background and back of it. I hope you understood that. It makes sense to me. Maybe it's just hard for me to explain it. But anyway, this is the whole basis of astronomy. If you look over here on this side, if you're following my pointer, this is how we figure out what the distance of stars are. There's something called a parallax. A parallax is a certain distance, and that's measured by an angle of arc. You know, just like you have 360 degrees, and each of those degrees is divided up. And for each angle of arc, there's a second. And a second is 1/3600th of a degree. So to give you an idea of how small that is, if you take a quarter and you look at it 5 miles away, if you were to tilt your telescope from one edge of the quarter to the other, that would be how slight the degree of change would be as you're pointing the telescope. It's that small. So that small distance is called a parsec, and it's considered to be a astronomical unit. That's how everything else is measured. And it's 3.26 light years. That's what a parsec is. That's how far it is. And the reason we're able to get this measurement is because we know accurately how far the distance is from the Earth to the Sun. Because it's going in the heliocentric model, it's moving around the Sun. The closest the Earth is from the Sun is 91.4 million miles, and the farthest away it is 94.5 million miles. So if you take those two together, you average them out, it's about 93 million miles. So the distance between the Earth to the Sun is an AU, or an astronomical unit. Now, the problem is that this unit, the astronomical unit, which is the basis of all other calculations of distances of objects, this has changed 27 times since the time of Ptolemy. He used the geocentric model, but yet he accurately measured the distance between the Earth and the Sun. So since his time, almost 30 times it has changed. Even in the 20th century, with all the technology that we have, it has changed numerous times, especially since Einstein published his theory of relativity, most recently in 1960, 1976, 1983, 2006, and as recent as 2009. This calculation has changed. Now it is exactly 149,597,870,700 meters. Exactly. That's what they say. So this is the standard until it's changed again. So you know, if you're doing any kind of mathematics, what to speak of higher mathematics, if you have a long calculation, you know, it takes pages and pages to calculate it, let's say. If at the very beginning you made a mistake on one of those numbers, everything else is thrown off, and the farther you go out, it's going to be worse and worse. It's going to be extrapolated. So, you know, just like if you're on a journey, you're going to go 1,000 miles, and you're pointed in your direction, but you off just a millimeter. By the time you get to where you thought you were going to go, if you're going in a straight line, it's going to be completely off. Similarly, when this thing changes, everything else drastically changes the farther you go out. So I'm really taking time on this, but it's complicated. So let's go to the next rung. So that takes care of nearby stars, but farther stars away, that the angle of arc is so small it's imperceptible. You can't measure it. These are things way out in the Milky Way galaxy. So you have to use a different method. There's a method which was created by Hertzsprung-Russell, the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. What it is that instead of using parallax, there's a chart that was developed, and they utilize nearby stars temperature. In other words, they measure the temperature by the color of the star and its relative brightness, its luminosity. So if you take those two factors, its luminosity and its color, or its temperature, you can plot it out. So that's what this Hertzsprung-Russell diagram is. They plot out where nearby stars are, what their temperature and luminosity is, and they put it on this chart. So if there's stars that are much farther out that can't be charted by parallax, then you can chart them simply by their luminosity and their temperature, and that's called a standard candle. The problem with this is that in this chart, obviously you've just seen a representation of the chart, but if you would see a blow-up of the chart, you would know that the chart, it's not just like a rainbow going from one end of the spectrum to the other. There's several rainbows. Some of them go this way, some go that way, some go this way, different ranges, and it's up to the astronomer to figure out which place in the chart that he's going to plot it. And then he guesses, he puts in this fantastic, complicated computation, and he comes out with something, and he takes his best guess for what the distance of that object is. So we've got to the third one, but that's acceptable in astronomy. But there's objects that are much farther than that. So these are called standard candles. Beyond that, there's something called Cephiids, or variable stars. Variable stars, just like what it means is when you look in the sky, the stars, they twinkle. The reason why they twinkle is between the Earth's atmosphere and the star themselves, there's a lot of junk in between. There's the atmosphere and all kinds of stuff. So when it twinkles, what's happening is that's distortion. So when there's stars that are so far off, the distortion is so bad that you just can't make out. You can't make a calculation, even using the speculative method of standard candles. You can't perceive what their color and their brightness is. So what do? You send out some satellites so you get out of the atmosphere, and then you can get a better calculation. So that goes up to the nearby galaxies. So that's one method, but what you do is you make a graph. So you see here, the Cephiids, you make a graph of what nearby stars are, and you measure what their luminosity and their temperature or their color is. You put it on this chart, and then what you see way, way far out, you try and match it up on this chart, and then you assume that's how far it is according to this chart. So if all of that works, if the radar range and the parallax, the standard candles, and the Cephiids, if that all works, if that all makes sense, if that's all accurate, then there's farther galaxy clusters that you just can't see. So the way that's measured is you have white dwarf supernovas. These are exploding stars, basically speaking. They're so bright that you can actually see them, and then there's certain calculations where they can assume that these stars are such and such, and they would correspond to the Cephiids, which would correspond to the standard candles, etc. And then there's stars that are galaxies are even farther than that. This is the sixth and last run. This is measured by redshift, which is subject to the Hubble's law, which is a complicated formula. But what basically it's saying is that if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, if that's true, then you use a computation from the Tiller-Fisher relationship, which was developed in 1977, assuming that there was a Big Bang, and that the universe is expanding at a uniform rate, then that would mean that from the beginning of the universe to the edge of the universe, you've got these light waves going out. As the light waves go out, they become less and less. It's got these big troughs and peaks, but as it goes farther and farther out with time, they become smaller and smaller. So what that creates is a smaller wavelength, so that creates a redshift. So if you can perceive the redshift of the most distant objects, then you can take that redshift and then assume it's so many billions and billions of light years away. So I hope that was not too boring for you and that you understood. I mean, I can understand what this is, but it's kind of hard to relate it. I didn't mention other things, but anyway, that's enough of that. All of this, if at the very beginning these calculations are off, it throws everything off. That means everything that they've assumed about the makeup of stars and planets and how they react, how they blow up, all those things, that'll all be destroyed. It all has to be recalculated or rethought. It's just like you got an image here of a house of cards. One card goes and the whole thing just falls apart. That's what happens. So now we go to our last slide. This is our last slide. Oh, actually, I went too fast. Excuse me. Before we leave this, we're almost done. The conclusion is that it's highly speculative house of cards. The scientists, the astronomers, what they do is they will fall back, assuming that all theories will continue to change over time. And that's a good thing. Every time there's a change, we come closer and closer to the truth. Well, if anybody remembers Mother Urmila, when she gave a class, and she was saying that when she was studying for her doctoral degree, one of the things that she had to read about and study was the philosophy of science. And the philosophy of science says that it's not, scientific knowledge is not just a steady trajectory up and up and up, building on this part of knowledge, going up the ladder of knowledge till you get to the top. It gets better and better and better. Rather, there's these constant revolutions that happen throughout history, and they're given in these various books. Where you point out that that's not how science goes at all. Knowledge is such in the scientific speculative world that there's so many anomalies that come up that one paradigm has to be completely rejected in favor of another paradigm. Just like the theory of relativity and general relativity completely overthrew the way we understand the universe now. And we're only talking about the 20th century. So there's these constant paradigm shifts. And what happens is that the older generation of scientists have to die out, and along with everybody else they taught, so that a new paradigm can come in, and that prominent accepted theory is adopted until the next revolution comes. So what happens is that with this kind of ascending process, so-called ascending process, you'll never reach the truth. It's manoritena. The mind is the chariot of the mind going all over that place. It's not bridle, it's chanchala. It's eternally changing. You can never get to the truth in this way. So therefore it can be asked, what is our pramana? Our pramana is shabda. So in actuality, shabda, hearing from the authorities, is the same with everybody. It's not that we understand what the cosmic distance ladder is, or what to speak of all these calculations, or what to speak of going there and actually seeing it with our own eyes. We just accept whatever the astronomers say. Pramana, the pramana is shabda. So our shabda, our authorities are different. It's not the scientists, it's not those who speculate, it's those that have actually seen and experienced higher realms. So in the Padma Purana, there's a famous verse, Atashri Krishnamadi Nabhave Grayam Indriyai. So our senses are grayam. They are gross senses. There is no way the gross material senses can perceive the holy name of the Lord. What to speak of the holy name of the Lord, it cannot understand even the subtler realms of the universe. So to go back to our original example about the dog can find his way home, but you can never explain to a dog the value of the home or the economic, social status of the owner. You can't even explain the topographical relationship of where the home is situated. But all of these things are very, very real. Now, one may object that we're talking about a geographic location space, which is quite different than a topographical measurement, or what to speak of a perceived value, which is a quality which versus a location or a measurement. However, still I think that the example of the dog is appropriate because we're talking about abodes, dwelling places, and the dog can, even with his limited senses, sure, he can appreciate and find a geographic location, but he cannot understand a mapped elevation or a perceived value which are real. So in order to understand my last final kaput's point, oh my God, way late. But anyway, last slide, promise you, last slide. This is a slide that I developed before about Nyaya. If we look back in the understanding of logic, there are different types of perceptions. If we go on this chart not from the left to the right, but from the right to the left, we see these are our senses, our mind, our intelligence. This is what we use. These are tools of perception. And what they do is they regulate our perception. So if we go back to the left, there's different types of perception. There's laukiki, which is ordinary perceptions, and there's alaukiki, or extraordinary perceptions. So ordinary perception is what we perceive with the senses. We don't need to cover that. We already know. But extraordinary perception, there's two types. There's three types. There's Saumya Lakshana, which Saumya means the same. So you can take objects. You can look outside in your yard and you can see there's rocks and there's trees. And then there's maybe people or animals. You group all these different things. So even though these are all kinds of different objects, you're grouping them because you have intelligence. That takes intelligence. That's an extraordinary perception. It's not just the gross ability to see, but it's to understand and to group what you're seeing. So the example that I'm giving over here, in the previous example, is that geographic location is not all. There are other perceptions, and that has to be only understood by intelligence. So there's Saumya Lakshana, and then there's Jnana Lakshana. Jnana Lakshana is when you take an object and you can actually perceive the qualities of the object without physically coming in contact with it. Just like, for instance, you walk into the kitchen, it smells great. And then you look at what's in the pot and wow, this looks great. You're salivating. You haven't tasted it yet, but by the smell and the sight, because of previous experience, that's called Lakshana. That's an extraordinary sense. These are extraordinary, but even more extraordinary are the yogaja, born of yoga. That is beyond anything that Saumya or Jnana Lakshana. Yogaja is what is perceived only through yogic meditation. So there is a mystic universe. You cannot see it through a telescope. You can't see it through a microscope because we're using our gross senses. No matter how much you extend them, you cannot see higher realms, higher dimensions, or these other lokas. It's not possible because of the senses, because of the bodies that we have. So therefore, we have to develop extraordinary senses, and that's done through the mystic process of yoga, or, as we see in the case of Dhruva Mahārāja, he practiced mystic yogicism, and the Vaikuntha airplane, the Vimana from Vaikuntha came to pick him up and take him there. So that's kind of my conclusion. I know that was really complicated. Maybe I spent too much time on the cosmic distance ladder, but that's complicated. I had to take my time to try and explain what it is. Okay, so now I'm going to unmute everybody, and if you have any questions or comments, then please go right ahead.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Ramananda Prabhu, this was amazing. is a great class, and all your illustrations that you showed, I mean, you really made an incredible point, you know, defeating the modern-day scientists, mathematicians, and astronomers that have everybody just hoodwinked and practically worshiping them, you know, as that they're the ones that know what's going on. And I, with everything that you presented, I really think you should write a book.
Oh, yeah. Right.
No, really. This is great. It's really great.
Jai Jagadish would have a laugh at that because I can't even put out a newsletter without making a bunch of mistakes. So that wouldn't.
Oh, well,
I can't even write a text message without making grammar errors. So
well,
I don't think that would work.
I mean, you can have editors do that, figure out that part, but I still think you should. You could.
Anyway, okay, thank you. I guess that means you kind of followed the points I was trying to make. Kind of
Ramananda?
Convoluted way. Yeah.
This morning a devotee came up to me and he was talking to me about that how he asked me, he says, do you believe we went to the moon? Which is, the way he starts off a conversation like that. And so I said, well, I simply follow what Prabhupada said. What would you say to someone who thinks, he says, this is science. They proved that they went to the moon. And he was very convinced. And he's generally a nice devotee. But anyway, what would you say after a presentation like this when they said we went to the moon? Scientifically, we showed, we went out of the atmosphere, we shot the rocket, walked on the moon.
Okay, so again, you can go to L.A., but if you're a dog, your vision is going to be much different than the owner of the house in Bel Air. They're both the dog and the owner, they have perception, but the difference in their perception is...
So he may think that I'm calling all the scientists dogs.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, I did point out there's the 4 defects, the senses are imperfect, optical illusions, we get tricked all the time. People like those kind of shows. They like to see how they do it, like, and different things like that. But he keeps saying, no, it's scientifically, how can you deny that? And he was... So I didn't get a chance. It was time for greeting the deities, and we didn't get back to it. So I was wondering if I was going to, when you put this together and put it up onto the I'm going to download it, or unless you can send it to me, and I'm going to have him listen to it and see if it cracks his faith a little.
Maybe it wasn't a hoax. Maybe it wasn't a hoax. Who knows? I mean, there's plenty reason to understand that it may have been a hoax. But let's say even if it's not, the vision that we have is through our gross senses. We want to understand other realms. You have to develop more subtle senses, and then you'll perceive it's there. And it's not that you don't see the gross stuff. You can see the gross stuff. But, you have subtle senses. You can perceive realms that are much, much different than what we can perceive now.
So, in that sense, you're saying that even if we went to a place that is called the moon, that was made up of the dirt and the different stuff that they went to, the actual way that we're referring to the moon is that it's a heavenly planet, and that realm that the society exists in is not available for our degree of adhikar. So, so we could just say it like that. So whether it is the moon or it's not the moon is not the actual relevant point. The point is that the realm that the heavenly planet exists in, you can't get there by spaceship.
That's correct. It's a dog sitting in the master's kitchen in Bel Air. He can only see a certain amount. He's there physically in a geographic location. Yeah, all those things are true, but there is no way he's on the level of the master, and the master perceives a heck of a lot more than he can.
Kind of reminds me of that statement. Was it Bhaktisiddhanta that said, you can't buy a ticket to Vrindavan? the same idea. If one is not an elevated soul, you go to Vrindavan and just see a bunch of pigs and monkeys and some old buildings and some deities that may even not look that impressive compared to some of the deities that we see. Our deities within our ISKCON society. Some of these are really old, famous deities. I mean, if you're not seeing that's really Radha, and that's really not. That's really Madan Mohan, one of those famous deities. So the untrained eye, it just looks like not that special. It's the same idea. I mean, there's so much going. All of Krishna's pastimes are going on in Braj. We can't see them. I think same idea. Go to the heavenly.
We don't see the holy name. We don't.
The rocks. Yes, correct.
We don't hear the holy name. We don't see each other. We're still got the other perception, gross perception.
Yeah, same.
Even
same,
with
yeah.
our
Same idea.
If let's say you're eating junk food all your life, eating a lot of sweets, blah blah blah. If you stop. Before, if you would taste something like a carrot, it's like so dull. Or you eat something like a quinoa. It's like bland, almost tasteless. You put a bunch of sugar on it. I know I'm talking from experience. As soon as you stop and you start eating a more healthy diet, the subtle senses, they start to come out, and you start to taste, even like with quinoa, however you say that. Quinoa, it actually tastes sweet. You eat a carrot, you're starting to perceive the sweetness that is there, and then what you used to do with salt and sugar and all that stuff is like, how could I have eaten that stuff? It's so like pungent or strong or too sweet or too salty. So even at present, you just for go on a different diet, and then you start to develop more subtle senses. So what to speak of through practicing the yogic principles? You develop perceptions that are unavailable to those that are too gross, way down in the line of chakras.
Even the Gayatri, they say you have to be in the mode of goodness for it to work. And we perceive a lot, or don't perceive a lot from that, just that one.
Okay. So thank you, Prabhus, very much for sticking this out. I know that was like a really, really long class. But if you at least understood what I was trying to say, then I consider it a success.
Is there going to be like a quiz at the end before you go? You hand out like a sheet of paper and
comprehensive.
Yeah.
No, I got a lot out of it. I'm just hoping there's no quiz at the end.
No, you have to repeat it again right now. Just start over and just repeat it. Explain it.
That was very, very well presented, and thank you for that effort. Well worth it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I guess that's it then. Thank you very much, Bruce. I'll go ahead.
Is there some reason I didn't notice like Honolulu on the map?
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy! The day is starting. I got to go. Sorry, I got all kinds of people calling me. Anyway, thank you very much.
We'll let you go.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you.